What's up, designers, and welcome back to Rempton Games. In today's episode of Game Designer Spotlight, we're going to be looking at the designer behind some of Nintendo's biggest franchises, Shigeru Miyamoto. We'll be taking a look at his history as well as the design philosophy that he used to design games such as the Super Mario Bros. Series, The Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Pikmin, and so much more. Before we talk about all of that though, I just really want to quickly thank all of you watching. You may have noticed, but the Rempton Games channel has recently passed 1,000 subscribers.
I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
I'm so grateful to every one of you who have subscribed, and I'm so excited to see how this channel grows from here. However, I also know that over 90% of my audience isn't subscribed. So if you haven't already, if you could hit the subscribe button and like this video, it would really help this channel grow. Who knows? One day we might even hit 2,000. The sky's the limit. With that out of the way, let's talk game design. Before Shigeru Miyamoto was one of the world's leading game designers, he was a small child living in Sonobe, Japan. As a child, Shigeru loved exploring the world, both indoors and out. Whether it was running around the maze of sliding doors in his home or plucking up the courage to explore one of the many caves that dotted the landscape, Shigeru let his imagination run wild. In addition to his adventuring, Miyamoto also began to develop a love of art, especially manga. It may have been this love that led him to get a design degree. No, not game design, that wouldn't be possible for another few decades, but an industrial design degree. However, after graduating, Miyamoto had no job lined up and still wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life. It was at this uncertain time in his young life that his father helped him get an interview at a relatively small Japanese toy company known as Nintendo. Miyamoto interviewed with Nintendo's president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, and was hired immediately after showing him some toy designs that he had worked on. Miyamoto quickly became Nintendo's first video game artist. During this time, Nintendo was barely getting into the video game business, and Miyamoto was responsible for creating not only a lot of the pixel art, but also designing the arcade cabinets of their early games. Unfortunately, not all of Nintendo's early video game efforts were successful. One particular flop, a game called Radar Scope, wasn't selling as well as it was expected to. In an attempt to offload a number of unsold Radar Scope cabinets, Miyamoto was tasked with the job of turning these cabinets into a brand new game. Miyamoto, being an artist and not an engineer, decided to start by designing the story of the game first. He chose to base the story of the game off of Popeye, the heroic Popeye and brutish Bluto both fighting for the attention of Olive Oyl. This decision was likely because of the recent Popeye movie that had come out in 1980 starring Robin Williams, making this the second time that Robin Williams has appeared in one of these game designer spotlights. He also happens to be my favorite actor of all time. He's just fantastic. I am what I am! However, when Nintendo was unable to get the license for Popeye, the characters were changed. Popeye became a generic carpenter, Olive Oyl became the carpenter's girlfriend, and Bluto became a gorilla from which the girlfriend would have to be saved.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
While it may not sound like much, this is quite possibly the first instance of an arcade game being designed story first. Up until this point, games tended to be driven by programmers, and the story was mostly tacked on after the fact. Simply by starting from a different perspective, Miyamoto had already begun to change the gaming industry. While Miyamoto's outsider perspective helped him see a different side of games, his lack of technical knowledge also got him into trouble when designing this game. He would often come up with an idea such as having the character be launched by a seesaw, only to be told by the development team that such a thing wasn't possible. However, despite this tension between the creative and technical visions of the game, it did eventually get finished. The last thing the game needed before being shipped out was a name. When choosing a name for the game, Miyamoto wanted to bring to mind the idea of a stubborn ape due to the antagonist of the game. He chose the word donkey because it represented stubbornness, and Kong because of its connection with the giant gorilla in King Kong. And thus, Donkey Kong the Stubborn Ape was born. Donkey Kong became a massive hit and led to more game design opportunities for Miyamoto. The carpenter from Donkey Kong would go on to be the villain in the sequel game, Donkey Kong Jr., before being the star of his own game, a little-known indie called Mario Brothers.
It's Mario and Luigi Mario.
However, Nintendo quickly began to realize that its future wasn't in arcade cabinets and began to develop its first home console, a device known in Japan as the Family Computer, or Famicom, and in North America as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. Miyamoto would be involved with designing a launch title for this new system that ended up being bundled with the system itself, Super Mario Bros. This console and this game in particular would help catapult Nintendo into being one of the giants of the video game industry, and Miyamoto right along with it. During the NES era, Miyamoto would work on a number of classic franchises including Ice Climbers, Kid Icarus, and Excitebike. However, perhaps his greatest achievement on this early console was a game based on his experiences running around and exploring the countryside around his home. A game called The Legend of Zelda. Fun fact, Robin Williams named his daughter Zelda after Princess Zelda from the games.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Throughout the years, Miyamoto has continued to shape and innovate not only Nintendo, but video games as a whole. He's been involved in classic games from every era of Nintendo's history and launched consoles from every generation. During the Super Nintendo era, for example, he helped create the Star Fox and F-Zero franchises and helped design the Super Nintendo controller with its innovative left and right bumper controls. During the Nintendo 64 era, Miyamoto was instrumental in helping make the jump from 2D to 3D games. He supervised the creation of Super Mario 64 with its innovative camera controls and open 3D environments. He also led the design of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which helped pioneer such features as locking onto enemies during combat and context-sensitive controls.
Hey, listen!
Miyamoto has helped guide Nintendo for over 30 years, and he still hasn't stopped innovating. He's still helping produce some of the biggest franchise games in the world, including Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, as well as creating new franchises such as Splatoon and ARMS. His contributions are innumerable, and it's very possible that without him, Nintendo would not be the industry titan that it is today. Now that we've learned a bit about his history, let's look at how Miyamoto actually designs games. Miyamoto is pretty unique among designers for the wide variety of different types of games that he's been involved in. From puzzles to platformers, shooters to sports, Miyamoto has helped design almost any kind of game you can think of. Yet, despite the vast differences between these games, they're all bound together by Miyamoto's unique philosophy of game design. Firstly, Miyamoto doesn't believe in following the industry. He doesn't design games simply to follow trends or make decisions based on focus groups. Instead, he tries to make the kinds of games that he himself would enjoy playing. He believes that if he enjoys the game, other players will as well. Because of this, many of Miyamoto's games can be seen as autobiographical. The Legend of Zelda, for example, was made as one of the first open-world games to mimic the sense of exploration that Miyamoto felt exploring the great outdoors.
It's dangerous to go alone, take this!
This is a common theme with his games. Nintendogs was inspired by his experiences with dogs and dog owners, while the Wii Fit series was inspired by his attempts to get fit and stay healthy.
And we want to pump you up!
Another common trait in his games are trying to make them playable by anybody of any skill level. To achieve this, Miyamoto believes that the controls should be intuitive and easy to pick up. This design philosophy has not only guided the development of his games, but of Nintendo's hardware as well. This principle of intuitive controls has guided the development of controllers such as the Super Nintendo controller, and led to innovations such as the N64's thumb control stick and the Wii's motion controls. Easy to learn controls doesn't necessarily translate to easy games, however. Miyamoto believes that one of the best feelings in games is a feeling of accomplishment and achievement, and this can only really be felt if you have to overcome an actual challenge. Games need to be easy enough that anyone can learn them, but hard enough that players have to work hard to actually complete them. Games also need to provide a balance between introducing new challenges to the player and introducing moments of ease and repetition so that the player can breathe. Another area where games require balance is the amount of information that's provided to the player. If players are given too much information, this takes away the opportunity for them to experiment, explore, and learn things for themselves. However, if they're not given enough information, the player may become stuck and have no idea what to do next.
You probably think I deserve this, don't you?
Miyamoto has also said that he wants to create a feeling of immersion in his games, and one of the best ways to do this is through fun, responsive movement. It's been said that when Miyamoto was designing Mario 64, he would spend hours just running around an empty void and making sure that controlling Mario felt right. And when testing Breath of the Wild, he would run around for hours just climbing trees. In fact, designing fun movement in games is such an important topic that I've already made an entire video about it, which you can find by clicking here. Another important aspect of controlling a character is making them feel real. To Miyamoto, characters need to feel like they actually exist, like they have weight and momentum. This is why Mario slides a little after landing from a jump, and when you quickly switch directions, you can feel the momentum shift. Finally, Miyamoto has said that the key to game design is to put yourself in the player's shoes and to try to see the game from a new player's perspective. When a game designer plays a game that they made, they're experts by default, and that can make it difficult to really understand how a new player would handle the game. To counteract this, Miyamoto suggested that developers switch their right and left hands when playing the game to simulate the difficulty of being a new player.
No. This isn't how you're supposed to play the game.
This philosophy doesn't just apply to controls, but also to how players collect information about the game. Sometimes, the test players complain that there are too many enemies in one stage, and when I approach the designer of that scene with that kind of complaint, sometimes he or she says, "Oh, maybe they couldn't find the star at the beginning." As soon as you find out that the star makes you invincible, it's more joy. And the developer insists that hiding the star in the beginning is gonna be great. But if game players don't understand this and they can't find the star, then the game doesn't make sense at all. As a designer, you probably have not only played tons of games before, but you know your own game inside and out. This can make it easy to lose perspective. What seems obvious to you isn't necessarily obvious to everyone else. The only way you can really know what your players are thinking and feeling while playing your games are by watching and really listening to your audience. With a 40-year history and dozens, if not hundreds of games under his belt, I could go on and on about Shigeru Miyamoto, but that's where I'm gonna leave it for today. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. If you want to see more, check out the rest of my Game Designer Spotlight series. I currently have entries on Sid Meier and Richard Garfield, with more on the way. And join me next week for the first official episode of my trivia game show, Trivia Arena. We have some great contestants lined up and it's gonna be a really fun match. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.